Next Sunday, I swear, I'm going to put the chairs in front and the cushions behind. Do you remember how it was back at Monroe Street where you couldn't get this far away if you tried?
Yeah. And way up there. That would have been where I would have been sleeping, my rock. Right. The good old days. Old days, yeah. They were good. They were good.
So you were mentioning about bringing all the beings and being awareness of all the beings, and lately I've been stretching it to the, and I'm not sure, but including all the formless beings.
Oh, yes.
And like the ones that are have gone through the bardo of dying and not yet reborn, or they're in Pure Land or some. But it seems that bringing them and then. So while my mother was alive, from the period at the end and the period when I was very young, fine. But there was this way too long a period when it wasn't. And I wonder if my understandings and my compassion for her now, if there's still a way that she can hear that. So if there is a karmic connection, can the, say like for a friend's sister who died, dedicating the practice for the 49 days and things like that. And I remember Tsoknyi Rinpoche telling somebody that when his father had died, yes, you can dedicate all the merit from your practice. But I'm wondering, is there also just that understanding or other things that can also almost like sound, radio waves that get picked up? Is just an analogy. Yeah.
Well, I'm not a really advanced cosmologist to be able to explain anything like that. But the thing that does seem clear to me, there was another contemplation that I was out, so you get a twofer out of this question, and I get to tell you something while I think more about what you asked. The other contemplation that I've been doing is to think, often I've thought, like, here we are in a building, and just by virtue of being here, we're connected to the people who built the building, and the people who made the things. And then I was thinking even more about that. I'm thinking about having worked here and knowing the people who put this patch in the floor and having overheard some of the conversation that happened. So just being here, we're actually connected not just to them sort of as these protoplasmic lumps would do things, but to the conversations, to what and the ideas, and to the ideas of just the thought forms of everybody that ever had anything to do with all the chain of things. Who who had this notion of a saw. I mean, that somebody sort of, a piece of obsidian worked a little bit better if it was like this as opposed to just like that. And so someplace, we're connected very intimately through all these kinds of things in different ways. So whether it's like radio waves, I don't know, but the more I looked at it, the more I could feel so many more dimensions to it. And it just felt so much more alive, and so much more like I was feeling all the different, more dimensions, not all, but more dimensions of the kind of the vitality and lives that touch us in so many ways. And just thinking, oh, I'm actually connected to the conversation that was going on, because they were discussing to do it like this or like that, and all kinds of irrelevant things that had nothing to do with the patch, but they were going on at the same time. But I found it very helpful to actually contemplate the arc of an arc of life, or sort of moments in an arc of life, to have more sense of that, kind of the dynamic, that it's a dynamic situation, that we're connected in a dynamic way, not so much like I'm this protoplasmic lump here, you protoplasmic lump there, we'll go away, then we're not connected, and now we're in hearing, we can see each other now, and then later we won't. But just the dynamic of it. You can look on the inside too and see more and more dynamics.
The inside.
Us.
By looking on the inside and seeing more dynamics.
Inside. I could say inside, but I actually said inside.
Okay. But by mishearing insight, I was going, well, it's what I'm seeing now and learning now, and that gives me the insight to her pain. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I thought I was around her then, but it's still dynamic now, in getting insight of, why she might have acted like that.
Yeah. And that's we tend to separate then and now, but the fact that it's dynamic now is not unconnected. It's very much of the piece of it.
Well, it seems like the teachers are always saying that, we say, well, can I, say prayers or relate to someone who died long ago? Can I? And they always say yes. And it's interesting. I ponder, why is that? How is that? And one thing that I think might be, or maybe it's the main thing that plays into this, but that, our sense of time is not any more reliable than our sense of, self and separation and the way things are. That we, is not, our sense of it is not reliable, and that time, maybe we can say time doesn't exist. At least it doesn't exist in the way that we think it does. And so to me, and they talk about the Buddha's, being of the three times, and I think that means like, not like in order, but like all the time, no time, whatever. So I think that's part of the key, so that we can actually relate to people from other, times. That connection is not, it's not done, and it's interesting, but I think that has something to do with it.
Yeah, just thinking off of those, like one of the things that's come to me lately about this is I was thinking about how my mother died in 2008. And so it's 2018. So anybody I meet who's like 9 or younger could have been my mom. And already back, if it's 49 days and she made it to human realm. And so I could meet a total little 8-year-old stranger somewhere, or maybe one of my 2 grandkids. And I'm going, wow, that could have been my mom in the last life. It was not, and then we get way too solid about it because they all been my mom in the last life. But it's just something to play with, like that time. And like when you said, could I affect her? Well, her, is gone. But we talk about it like that. But the minute the body and consciousness separate, that person's done. Even that person wasn't really there the way we thought. But for sure, to have the person, you have to have the body and the consciousness together. So when they end, because the body doesn't go forward and consciousness leaves, that person's kaput. Even the relative person who never sort of existed. The consciousness, but it's not got your mom's name on it. The consciousness came from beginningless time. Beginningless beings have contributed or been in that I don't even know how to talk about it, a result of that consciousness or put imprints on that consciousness. So we even get like that, like, oh, it's my mom's consciousness that went forward. No, it isn't. That's too personalized, according to the teachings. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the, I was toying with throwing in another exercise in practice tonight. And Dora mentioning the foibles of time. They actually speak of the 4th time. So that's sort of an atemporal, I don't quite get it, but it's certainly not. Stan, are you familiar with that? Beyond time, but it's kind of like, okay, we'll give you your past, present, and future, but now let's beyond that, some time that doesn't work that way, but there are pieces about our immediate experience where we can begin to explore some things that we take to be very, I'm about to talk about space, so I'm all of a sudden thinking, well, to say we have a very solid experience of space is, but I think you know what I mean. That we say we experience space all the time, but when you start to look, it becomes very strange. So we can do a little bit of it. Let's do a little bit of experiential exploration, because it's possible to explore just beginning with mindfulness of the body. So just the mindfulness of bringing our attention to just the domain of our physical sensation, just kind of the envelope of our body, and letting the mind, the attention, do a little bit of an inventory of that. The body scan, scanning the sensations from the head through the body and out the limbs. So just take a moment to just allow the attention, the awareness to kind of familiarize itself. And from here, I tend to go to the hands for this part of the exploration, but it could be any part of the body, just to allow the awareness to settle into the sensation of the hands, whatever sensation there is. You can check to see that let go of any tendency of the mind to generate an image of the hands. If that arises, just let that go as a separate thing arising. And then look for a minute into the actual sensation of one part. Even to make it simple, you could just use one finger or just one part of the hand. Then look, is there an inside and an outside to that sensation? Then if your hands are separated, just holding the tension on the sensation of both hands. Is there an actual sensation in this domain of sense, of the space between what you feel in one hand and what you feel in another? What's the actual sensation of space? There might be some thoughts that arise. Are they in the same place as the sensation of the hands, or a different place? If they're in a different place, what's the sensation of the space between? you can continue the exploration in a contemplative way, looking at how we recall where we are, where other things are, where our home is, and how many pieces come together in our construction of our sense of space and location. And I think the more that you actually look into this, the easier it is to let go of some sense of that it's just a simple matter. So, if you have any comments or thoughts based on that bit of exploration, you can go there or anywhere else you like. I find it useful to explore all these kinds of things. These are, I don't know if, it's a little bit similar to some actual formal insight practice instructions that I've heard, but it's not the same. But this can give you a little bit of a flavor for how to be creative in looking at your experience, to see perhaps like something more, even just that piece of looking to see, where is my mental image of my hand versus the actual sensation? How do those dance together? How are they not together? How does a sense of space arise? Do I see space? If there were no objects to be seen, would I have any sense of space?
I was just reading recently an article by a talk by Khenpo Sotrim Rinpoche, and he said along these lines, most of us have a sense of the earth, and there's a top and a bottom to it, and the top's called the north and the bottom's called the south. And he said, we have no idea in space where the top and bottom are, but we are very like, no, you know, the Antarctica is at the bottom and the North Pole is at the top. And he's like, yeah, really? You totally know that. And where would you go in space that would orient you like that? Bottoms and tops. Even of the whole Milky Way galaxy, what's the top and bottom of that? So that's kind of taking off from your thing of, if, you know, the space is space and we don't have other things to orient us, how do we know? But we get so sure, and we kind of need that somehow. I'm very interested in that. Like, I didn't like him saying that. I mean, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to be like sitting here for the moment. But I was like, wow, that can shake you up if you think deeply about it. Like, wow, where am I? What am I? Where am I? The inside of Zopa, the outside of Zopa. If there's no outside of Zopa, how would I know the inside? is this the boundary?
And how do I find the this?
Yeah. And breath goes in, breath goes out. So is that part of it? My venerable children used to always tell us while you're eating, watch the bite go towards your mouth and decide, when does it become you? Is it when it goes in the mouth, you could still spit it out? Is it when you swallow, when some metabolism occurs? Where on that whole continuum do you say now that's part of Zopa? Is really fascinating. You can't find it. That's the point. You can't find the moment, just like you can't find the moment when a glass breaks. I mean, is it breaking now because it's falling? Is it just when the first little crack happens? Where's the glass broke? We think we know all these things and can pin them down. It's not like that.
Just a comment on it. It reminded me of something. I think you said, like, in a way, like it feels like we kind of need to have those perspectives, and I think a part of that too is, I mean, when you were saying, you know, why does the globe have certain continents on the top, and I was thinking, well, it's because, you know, the folks that colonized the rest of the world are at the top, and that's why we make the globe that way. And you know, which is why, right? And I think that there's these cultural perspectives that are challenging, I think, to kind of to unwind and to tease apart. I remember when I first started practicing here, and Lama Michael would say, you know, pick a spot to rest your attention on the object. You know, and it could be just a spot in the person's sweater in front of you. And I remember thinking, oh, no, I need, like, you know, a statue of the Buddha. Like, it needs to be like, I can't just pick some spot on a sweater. Like, there needs to be a perspective that is meaningful and makes sense and is part of, you know, like, and it took a long time before I could do the spot on the sweater or whatever. You know, it's like, because I think we're, especially in our culture, I think we're you know, trained really from an early age to find all these perspectives that are very meaningful, tangible, and you know, they kind of help everything make sense. And the challenge of that is very valuable, but I think, you know, it's difficult.
There are so many layers to it. One of the things that I sometimes try to do, if I'm someplace not so familiar, I try to think exactly which direction is my house. It's kind of like, so it's right over there. And it would be pretty humorous if we all pointed at our houses and found out just kind of what margin of error is is involved, and all the pieces that we hold in our mind in order to create some kind of sense. It's that way. And my memory of what downtown looks like, that's a piece of it, sort of so there's all these layers of memory, and then which parts of downtown do I pay attention to? Then it becomes involved in, like, well, it's the big buildings, or it's the something, and then how do I construct this narrative of my life? And all these things kind of weave together. All kind of very woven, and we don't notice how it's happening. But it has practical utility, you know. Otherwise, you know, I would start out that way to go home and
not get there.
Not work. But my sense of where it is and the actual way that I get there are not really the same thing. They're only kind of provisionally connected. I'm not actually going home. I'm going home by a pattern, by a mental map, a mental pattern, a behavior, a learned behavior. I'm not going home by dead reckoning across the Sahara with, you know, it's kind of, yeah.
But I think the application of it is the Dharma kind of application. Really is, we make the world up. But, what's coming to me right now is the way Lama Michael talked this morning about, this wasn't his phrase, but from what we're saying here, we make our suffering up. Nobody else makes our suffering for us. We're totally responsible. And we don't see that. We're like, no, that guy made my suffering, and that one. But no, we make it up. Because guy A does a certain thing, and I suffer off it, and someone else feels great about it. It's the same thing, but I'm responsible for that suffering, my reaction, my story. And until we see that, he talked about that this morning, kind of first thing. We're responsible for our suffering. And until we get that, I think we're just bound to repeat it over and over. And that's so basic to get it. I'm the one causing myself the yo-yo of up and down, grab on, oh, this will make me so happy, and then crashing down, oh God, it didn't work, oh, and then grabbing again. And who's doing it?
And all those patterns where we believe one cause or another cause for our experience, they fit very nicely into these larger maps of our life and our stories and our narratives, and even our sense of physicality. They fit into that, and that makes them far more believable
and harder to stop.
So that's one of the ways that insight into our own experience, just how just the immediate reference points of our experience, where we think, oh, well, this is just the facts right here. I'm starting with my body. These are the obvious facts, the truth of the matter. And then it goes out, and that fits into all this other context. But when we start to look carefully at how our experience of that arises, then things open up a little bit. Particularly watching, the more we can become familiar with watching actually the dynamic of how things play out in the mind, the more space there is there.
Kind of playing off that, as I had an experiment yesterday that arose, and so I'd like your perspective, because you should have shared on this, and that's a whole series of events and experiences came up in my life in the last couple of days. Then I noticed the mind of deep discouragement came up yesterday, and as a reaction to that, a part of my old stored reactions were also deep self-judgment. And I noticed myself attacking myself and just being really unkind. And did that for a little while. Then I realized, oh, holy petunias, I'm really re-stimulated here. Something really, really got me. And I'm really fallen into a hellacious place. And I knew intuitively what it was. And I haven't experienced anything like that for a long time, actually. So, and I know what techniques and things I used to help me transform that and be present with it and allow it not to be continued. But generally, in the Buddhist path, when you notice your mind is a mess and you're proving your deepest incompetence and beating yourself up, what is a good attitude of mind or practices in that moment when you catch yourself, or if you're able to catch yourself, how to stop that process and use it for Dharma practice as some good.
What did you use?
Well, first just awareness. I noticed, wow, these experiences which part of me said, well, I don't like this experience, and I don't like this one either. And by the way, this thing either. And I noticed fear came up and judgment of others, non-acceptance. I noticed also about physical things, so anxiety and fear came up. Just a lot of emotions that were uncomfortable all swirling together. And at that point I noticed when I went out to mow the lawn, I was kind of all lost in all of that. It's not the lawn's fault, but in my mind. And then I said, sweetheart, we need a reboot. Go get your Dharma books. Go into the house. Go out into your garden and sit out in the garden and allow yourself to just chill out. And so I read did a whole series of loving kindness practices for myself. Read over a lot of inspirational experiences, and I reminded myself of the truth of my birth, precious birth, and the truth of impermanence. Although right now those states didn't feel impermanent, they felt quite solid in the moment. I was sure that all this was true, but then I realized through contemplation that no, it was changing and would not be the same. I also reminded myself that that's not who I am. That like you're talking about, I'm just the awareness watching all this float through like clouds. And so I reminded myself of that and just was very kind. It also reminded me a teaching that's stored somewhere in my consciousness, obviously, are fragments of old behaviors and old reactions that have been largely transformed, mainly most of the time. But occasionally, certain life experiences seem to re-stimulate or trigger my dark moods and self-judgment and yuck. So it was very helpful for me to just say, sweetheart, this is an example of what you've been working with, and see, be appreciative that you've received these tools and practices to help you work with your mind when you're really bummed and you can't make the situation better. And even, and so I was very grateful with that. And it was interesting today. You wonder, well, where in the hell did that go? Which is most of the time. But and it was very sneaky, because it's like, well, you wouldn't plan to step in a whole 55-gallon of dog poop. you try to avoid it, but all at once it kind of comes up and you go, oh, thanks for sharing. And I know that part of me is not, I'm never, we visited my in-laws for a Passover, and I was very kind and loving to them, and we always do drive-by kissing when we go over there, so we kiss them a lot, and are very kind to them. And I said, Bob, sweetheart, what you need is drive-by kissing yourself, dear. And so I figured if it's good enough for my in-laws, it's got to be good enough for me. So that's what I practiced. I figured, because I'm never cruel to other people. But occasionally the part of me says, well, you're imperfect. Your karma that you've done is bringing this to you. See there? If you were just better, you shit, then things wouldn't work out this way. And then I said, dear, I've always done the best I could. And, and I love you. As weird as you are, I love you wherever you are at this moment. And so that's what I practiced. But it wasn't easy. It really was a great teaching, though, in impermanence, watching the states arise, feel very solid and real, and it just shaped my temporary behavior. Mm-hmm. And then I was kind of like, wow, that was a teaching.
Yeah. It all rides on the platform of awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that in turn rides on some degree of stability based on the learned experience that being caught by the stories, being caught by the experiences is not the way to some kind of openness. That's the way to close down.
No.
But there isn't any other way to start it off. It's unfortunately too simple.
Right.
We sometimes wish it was more complicated, so it would be more entertaining or something else. But
Right.
just being with those experiences it's the only way to start.
Well, yeah, and I've tried it before when I didn't stop and I kept focusing on the negative and playing into the tapes, and I ended up in personal hell. So I learned from that experience, well, sweetheart, that doesn't work at all. I'm not sure what does exactly at that point years ago, but I said that didn't do it. So I learned by that comparison.
It's the first step is renunciation in that regard.
Yeah.
That's
And it was a little embarrassing to share it with you because I said, well, hell, you've done Dharma for quite a while now. You should not be having these states of mind come up. And he's saying, well, dear, surprise.
yeah. That's if you read some of the Dzogchen writings, I'm thinking of particularly about the crucial points of practice. You would think that once you've got a few good stiff belts of insight, down the hatch, we've got a little insight under us with us, that things wouldn't happen,
Right.
things wouldn't ripen. But at one end, and we can also turn this on others, that if they had any insight, none of this stuff would be coming up anymore. Nothing would be happening for them. But it occurred to me at one point that until full Buddhahood, where karma is exhausted, there are karmic things that will bubble up. So when we read things like the kleshas will unravel and untie themselves like a snake untying a knot in a snake untying itself, or things pass by like the trace of a bird in the sky. This sounds great, and you think, well, if I was like that, then none of this stuff would come up in the first place.
No.
But that's not actually the thing. So the thing is actually learning how to come back and go as deep as possible with whatever comes up, not hoping that it's not going to, because that's if nothing else, it's an exercise in arrogance.
Right.
So, I will never again be angry. Nobody will ever get under my skin ever again. I will never be trapped by the memory of something that happened in the past that upset me. Nothing like this will ever. Yeah. But to be able to, it's quite something to think that actually to develop a profound realization. Even it's good I think to remember that even for people with a profound degree of realization, I would consider Patrul Rinpoche, who was the author of the Crucial Point, that he would have that, and he's talking about stuff coming up, and he's talking about being able to deal with being able to recognize the play of the kleshas as they arise, as being kind of the critical skill. He's saying that's more important than achieving a profound stillness. The great line in there says, we may be able to achieve this profound stillness, but when we arise from meditation, the rotten corpse of our thoughts will rise again. One of the best lines. So working with the rotten corpse is really kind of there's kind of I think a gentleness that can come with that, and a little bit of humility, and something can be different when we're not feeling like I've been practicing all these years. Nothing should happen to me anymore. It's like, no.
Yeah, better to. I've really seen this and felt it myself, the suffering of expecting to be perfect or be on top of it. That's a suffering in itself, because A, it's not reality, and B, when the thing comes, you beat yourself up. But one of the things that I'm really interested in, as you were talking, Bob, is how often you describe, we're long friends, so we talk Dharma quite often, but you describe talking to yourself like, okay, sweetheart, okay this, okay that. And I do that too, and I find it very effective. And we haven't really discussed it like this. Like I will talk to my klesha self, Like, for example, one of my big shticks is anxiety, and it will just start. I'm in the kitchen by myself, nothing's happening, and anxiety just starts. And I'm getting to a place now where very quickly, because I'm some stability and paying attention, I go, oh, and it's usually physical. It's usually right here in this chakra, and I feel it. And if I'm have some space, I'll just stop and go, oh, hi, anxiety. Oh yeah, you're here again. Oh yeah, okay. So let me stop for a minute. Yep, there you are. There you are. And really feel it, the way you feel like your breath going through your nostril. And it does that dissolution thing most often. But there's something key about that talking to myself. And I've never heard, we've never really talked about it, but I talk to it like, Sophie, you're in the kitchen alone, there's nothing happening here. Or okay, dear, you're all right. It's just helpful. I don't know. Is it a technique? I've never read it in Buddhism. Maybe it's just a Western psychological technique.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think I remember some things in Patrul Rinpoche's writings. He's talking about, there you go, self-grasping.
He says, I see you.
I see you.
Yeah,
So,
I've even said
so
that.
you're in good company. You're in good company.
Yeah, he says about his stuff rising. I see you, and I kind of like, I won't let you get away with this. And it's part of his own thought pattern that he's talking to. I find it very helpful because it kind of externalizes the klesha, and then it doesn't have the grip identity, like I am stuck.
It points your awareness back to the true meaning.
Yeah, like the wheel is sharp weapon.
Yeah, Pema Chodron also, I know she talks about making friends with your anxiety and making friends with your other pains and habits, and it is kind of externalizing it, and it seems I've done that too after I studied those teachings, and it does seem really useful to kind of, oh, there you are again, I know you, my old frenemy, anxiety, I know she emphasizes that.
Yeah, it's different. It's different when we identify ourselves as the thing, than as this guest. And I think it was Suzuki, a friend of mine. I forgot if it was Suzuki Roshi or Kobenchino Roshi, but he was one of those teachers said to him. He said, I think some kind of anger was coming up. He says, it's okay. You can invite the anger in for tea. Just don't let it spend the night. So you can have that, but that's the same thing. You're kind of telling this story about this experience as though it's a guest that you could invite in and maybe get to know a little bit, but then, but I want to read the crucial point of practice just because I brought it up.
It's a great text.
What's that? I know, it's only a minute. That means I'll go 45 seconds over and longer if we keep talking about it. I pay homage to the Guru. I pay homage at the feet of the omniscient Father, his sons, and their lineage, as well as the glorious protector, the Guru, who directly teach the nature of primordial liberation, the reality of the inconceivable great perfection. Beyond eliminating flaws, accomplishing qualities, adopting and rejecting, the present mind, relaxed and settled into itself, is the wisdom of uncontrived and changeless awareness. If you rest right within it, that's the unity of view and meditation. If you know how to meditate, but do not know how to be liberated, your samadhi is like that of the gods, it is taught. Thus, it is crucial to gain the confidence of realization right within liberation. Through settling your restless mind, the samadhi of its still aspect, you may suppress your afflictions temporarily, but if you do not know the secret essential point of realizing their self-liberation, upon encountering the right circumstances, the rotten corpse of your thoughts will rise again. If you know the essential point of realizing self-arising and self-liberation, thoughts of adopting and rejecting are like sketches on water. Even if they arise temporarily, they are unable to remain and dissolve. Their arising and liberation are simultaneous, and they are unable to stand their ground. Even if bad thoughts come up, you do not accumulate bad karma. Since they are realized instantly, whom could they benefit or harm? If you lack the essential point of them being liberated in their own place, even if you seize upon the mere recognition of the infinite flow of the undercurrent of thoughts and afflictions with mindfulness, good and bad thoughts will give rise to hope and fear. Through this, formational karma is accumulated, the cause of samsara. Therefore, a single instant of self-liberated awareness is superior to 1,000 experiences of a still mind. Thus, all the essential points of view, meditation, and conduct, such as primordial liberation, self-liberation, liberation upon arising, and naked liberation are one. So familiarize yourself with the crucial point of realizing self-liberation. If you understand this crucial point, there is no need for any other view or meditation. All good thoughts emerge as a continuous stream without fixation. Even if you make efforts in virtue, you are free of a presumptuous mind that clings to that as supreme. All bad thoughts vanish like a knot tied in a snake. Even if the 5 poisons arise, they are instantaneously liberated in their own place. The hosts of neutral thoughts are settled in themselves, the expanse of awareness. Self-appearing and self-liberating, they resemble the traces of a bird in the sky. The root of samsara is mistaken thought. If you bring thoughts onto the path and possess the confidence that they are liberated, this is called samsara being liberated as the expanse of nirvana. Through confidence in the scope of liberation, you take bad circumstances onto the path. If you lack this essential point through platitudes and empty talk, you may speak of a mere object of intellectual understanding as being your realization. But that will just naturally bring the faults of your own bad character to light. This is worse than the ordinary solid fixation of the 5 poisons, and is the flaw of not knowing the scope of liberation. Therefore, the meaning of the crucial point of view, meditation, and conduct comes down to this confidence of realizing the manner of liberation. So it is essential to bring it onto the path of realization by fusing it with any circumstance. Though what I said here is not present in my own mind stream, I have written it down unmistakably by relying on the words of the omniscient Guru, the embodiment of the Buddha. This is the crucial point of practice, so keep it in mind. Sarva Mangalam.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And the crucial point of practice by Patrul Rinpoche, this is a translation that shows up in a book, compilation of Vajra songs of realization that Karl Brunholz put together. I think it's called
Straight from the heart? No, that.
An Arrow to the Heart.
No,
Or that, no, straight, I don't know.
Has an arrow.
Let me see, I think it was Straight from the Heart.
Straight from the heart.
Buddhist Pith Instructions.
It's a
Straight from there.
beautiful book. Really beautiful.
And you could email a prayer.
Yes, I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Email Bill. He'll email you the prayer.
Yeah.
And you don't have to buy the whole book. Yeah, yeah, you can meditate on that for a while, a lifetime.